Alright everyone, and welcome back to my guide on how to speedrun Zack and Wiki, and in this part I'll be covering the third level in the game, the 3 Colossi. Now, 3 Colossi, just like Pit of Tragedy, is a pretty short run. It doesn't have any major differences between its IL or any percent, so I'll just go over the level once from an IL perspective, and the same thing is applicable to the any percent route, just without cutscene skips. Because of it being very short and not having too many movements, I've just given this a difficulty rating of 1 out of 10, just like the previous two levels. And without further ado, let's get into the actual run. So we're going to head over to the boards for 3 Colossi, and we'll open up this video. Okay. So start the run off, the first thing we want to do is we want to head over to the Totem area. Now, how this how the things are positioned is RNG. Like, there's a few different areas, there's a few different ways the totem pieces can be placed. So it'll always be at least one of them that you'll have to rotate. So keep that in mind, that you cannot avoid rotating one of them, otherwise that would be by far the most ideal totem positions. But so there's always one to rotate, and also I've found that the best positions are ones where you have the two body pieces on one side and the head piece on the other side. That way you don't really have to aim very precisely to avoid picking up the head piece. You just aim in the general direction of where the body pieces are and you'll pick up one of them and it should be fine. So we'll play it again and we'll see how the totem gets stacked. So this one had only one rotation right at the very end, so very easy. Although you could see I was clicking a bit over there, so that definitely could have been a time save. Now the way I like to do this is I point the Wii remote forward, and then if I need to rotate a piece, as I'm picking it up, I flip the Wii remote over completely, and I just continue to point this way. Now, even though the Wii remote is flipped upside down, if I aim up, the cursor still goes up and all that, so like that doesn't affect orientation. So as Zack reaches his hand forward to pick it up, and I know I need to rotate it, I'm rotating my Wii remote. So when it gets picked up, it's already flipped, and then I'm just aiming for the middle and pressing A to place it. And that's essentially that's my strategy for it. That's what I do every time. You can try a few other things. I'm pretty sure you can keep it upside down and continue moving it around and still flipping it. And also another thing I do is, with this one, as you could see, the last one was flipped upside down. So what I actually did during that is I kept the Wii remote upside down. I then aimed for the lever, and as I'm going for the lever, I then flip it back and do a normal lever pull, just so I'm not wasting time turning the Wii remote when I could be selecting the lever instead. So again, I'm going to encourage experimentation, find out which grip and how to rotate the Wii remote works best for you. But I just generally do a full flip and hold it normally, but upside down instead. If you want though, you can just do like a wrist turn like that and move it around like that if that works for you. So we go and we flip that, get ready to skip the cutscene. Only do that after it pans across to the totem. If you press it too early, it's going to show you the Wii grip controls. Anyways, next the crank is always going to fall in this same position here. So again, with a bit of practice, just memorize where the crank falls, practice positioning your Wii remote there to grab it as soon as possible and pick it up. Next we head over to this one and we want to flip and then put the crank in. Now, my strategy for flipping the crank immediately is once I've interacted with the crankshaft area, and so the camera's gone black to zoom into this position, I hold the Wii remote up completely vertically, and normally that works for me. It does a flip instantly, and then during the flip animation, I position it straight and I go to start mashing A on the crankshaft. So that might not work for you, the instant flip. If that's the case, just wait till the camera's there and then sharply flick it up, and that should also flip it. So experiment again a bit with that section. Then, whilst it's in the flip animation and you're aiming to insert it into the crankshaft, I've found that it's best to aim slightly below the hole, because I found that the hitbox for it is like the hole and a bit below. It's not very generous on the top side. So I always aim just a little bit lower because the bottom part seems to be a bit more generous with its hitbox. Or at the very least more consistent for me anyways, but you can experiment a bit with that. Anyways, once that's inserted, we start cranking. Now, you don't have to crank too fast for this because it does have a max speed it can go at. In fact, if you're going like this, super fast, you're actually probably going to mess up the motion controls. It's going to get confused as to what you're doing. And it's going to get confused as to what you're doing. It's going to like start to stop and stutter. So just do it at a consistent pace like that. There's no need to go too fast because that crank moves at a fixed speed. So you won't be saving time going nuts. In fact, you'll actually be losing time by causing it to stop and start a bunch. So just keep that in mind. And once it pans over and once it like the box comes in, that's when you can start pressing minus to skip that cutscene. And next, instead of picking up the totem head on the side here, what we actually want to do is, you can see I position my cursor here. And it's around about this band here you want to go for, close to the center. And you want to walk there and then drop the crank, and then walk back and grab the totem head. Now that wasn't the greatest crank drop. You want to aim to position yourself maybe around this area so that when you drop the crank lands here. Essentially your goal is have the crank land in a position where after you're done dropping the totem, you can pick up the crank without walking. That is the ideal spot to drop the crank. And then you just want to be as far to this side as possible while still getting it there to minimize the movement. That's the ideal strategy. So as I've grabbed the head, and now I'm going to head over to the pressure plate to place it down. And as you can see, the crank is a bit far, so I am going to have to walk. But ideally, you just pick up the crank without walking if you've dropped it correctly. I flip the crank again. I insert it into this one, and then it's just a matter of turning this as well. And again, once the boxes come in, you can start pressing minus to skip this cutscene. That's not applicable for any percent though. And then you got to head up to the chest. Now, the chest movement in this level is very finicky, like it can really mess you up. So what I like to do is I like to click towards the top of the stairs first. Then as the camera pans across and I'm just below the chest, sort of, that's when I ring the bell, start exercising the ghost early. Then as the chest stutters, I move again to the top of the staircase. And after I'm at the top of the staircase, I have the cursor positioned just there in the center of the chest. Press A once, because again, pressing it, a lot of A presses here really messes up the movement. It's a pretty delicate area to move around in. And there we are, open the chest, and that's the level done. So now I'm going to play the full level for you, so you can see the whole thing in action.
See, this totem wasn't as good as the last one, so that's not really going to matter too much. We had, like, the opportunity for a 129 right there. And we went and messed it up. Okay, good bell, good chest movement. only downside was the totem, and the crank drop probably could have been a little bit better.
And that there is my tutorial on how to speedrun 3 Colossi for both the IEL and any% categories. So this one implements a few new strategies such as dropping items in areas to plan ahead and reduce backtracking with movement to improve time. The main things to practice here are the totem stacking and the where to drop the crank. The rest is fairly straightforward. In the next part, I'll be going over how to speedrun Flute of the Grail and Goblins, and that level will introduce much more complexity and some new things like cycles, which dictate how and when you can save time and in what intervals, as well as building upon other things like item handling and movement. This was also the last level in this series to have a 1 out of 10 difficulty rating, so the upcoming runs are going to begin to get both longer and harder. I hope this video was able to help some of you pick up some small tips and tricks and help with your runs. I'll see you all next time.